Why is it important that we master the skill of charisma and speaking?
Because it's in everything.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when people think of speaking, they think of public speaking and they think of those isolated incidents of getting up on stage or presenting at work. But speaking is in everything you do.
Yes.
Conversations with friends. It's intimacy with your partner. It's how you enunciate yourself. It's the type of people that you attract into your life, because charisma, it's an energy to a degree of how you make people feel, which is also a skill set.
Yes.
So it's speaking is not isolated. It is everything you do and however you move about your day.
Yeah, so true. Anyone who was like,
but I don't want to be a public speaker.
but when you walk into a room, whether it's dating, whether it's a pub, whether it's a new social circle or a networking event, you're going to have to present yourself, you're going to have to speak. And charisma is part of that. The reason that this topic, we obviously both froth talking about this. We spoke about this at length yesterday by the pool. And it was so cool the way it actually happened organically, because I had a mastermind call with my with the Mind School Method clients, and one of them asked a really potent question, which I thought was so great and really observational from her too, like a great student. She was like, I'm noticing all these coaches that I look up to, all these really successful business owners, they're so charismatic and they've just got this thing like charisma. And how do I get that? And how did you get that? And it was such a great conversation to have, because there was a lot of unpacking beliefs and a lot of what is charisma and is it a skill? Is it something we're naturally born with? Is it something we can teach? And I know we've both got a lot to say about this, so I'm so pumped for this conversation. But can you give, from your experience and your background, like what's your background in speaking? And then let's unpack, like, so is it a skill or is it something that we're naturally like you're born good at this?
So I love public speaking, like the kind of public speaking people are talking about, but also anytime, what you were saying before, anytime you're speaking in public, as long as you're not at home, you're public speaking, right?
Yeah.
And so I started competitively public speaking on stages from a really young age. So by the age of 10, I was speaking to audiences of 500 to 600 people. So that, and that was at a competitive level.
Which is most people's worst nightmare.
Literally the worst, their worst nightmare. And like the first time I went into competitive debating, I went to state championships. And then it was really interesting. So I loved it then. I was such a show pony, like put me in front of a stage, give me a microphone. And then I was fine up until my later years in high school. And then when I went into university, pendulum swing the other way. I would shake, I would get jittery, I would get brain fog, I couldn't think. I was so nervous because I was making it mean so much. Like I had to be perfect, I had to get good grades, I had to achieve. And then I went into a career in law. So, and then a lot of law is advocacy, and I was, in courtrooms and all of that type of stuff. But again, I was so nervous in that because I didn't have repeated exposure to it. It was very isolated. I might be in court and then there'd be nothing for 3 months and then I'd be back again.
Yeah.
And I didn't break through again until I went into an in-house legal role, which means I was a lawyer for a company. And it was almost every single day. I would get pulled into an office, pulled into a room, and I just had to present on the spot.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would be, I'd walk in and there'd be like 50 middle-aged men on a board that like are looking to me for my on-the-spot advice about the direction, their legal like liability, their exposure, and I had to give them advice that would change the direction of what they were going to do or not. And it wasn't until I was in those moments that I started building that relationship of self-trust and confidence. And I was like, oh, I'm actually really good at this. And it made me fall back in love with speaking again.
Yeah.
And then to the point that when I got into my coaching career, I'm back in love with it again. Yeah. I love it so much. I'm like, give me, we've got 3 cameras in front of us now. Can we have 5?
It's like the show pony is back.
Yeah, it's back. But it's what I love about it is it wasn't just something I, inverted commas, was innately born with and have always loved. I loved it and then I hated it and then I loved it again.
Yeah, so interesting. And this is why, well, we've met before, but yesterday we were like, actually, nice to meet you properly in person and hang out all day. And I was like, fuck, we're the same person. Even looking back at our background, mine was very, very similar. So at a young age, I was the kid who, remember English at school? There was like, all right, here's your assignment. It's an oral presentation. Yes. And I was that kid that was like, yes, while everyone was like, panic attack, got to go get a note to get out of this, all of those. And I was like, yes, love public speaking so much. And then did very well in it. Because you do well at it, you're like, I'm going to do this at university. So I went on to university, same as you. I did law, and I also did it with journalism, and I was doing radio and TV and all of these things because I loved speaking. I loved it so much. And even I never practiced law. That's a whole other conversation, but I was like, actually, no. But when I think about what attracted me to it initially, it was like, you know, that idealistic dream, which it's not a lot of what law is, but it's like, I'm going to stand in a courtroom and speak and get someone on cross-examination. And I'm going to be the Harvey that just wins over the court case. You know, it was this whole speaking thing. Yeah. And my whole background has been speaking. And then I moved into teaching, which is, like you said, with the reps, every single day, standing in front of assemblies, standing in front of staff rooms, standing in front of a whole room of teenagers who I might say, like the 50 white men in the boardroom, probably second to that as the hardest people to win over in speaking, teenagers that don't want to be there learning about Shakespeare.
Because what I'm hearing as well from you and also from me, it's not just the reps in speaking, but learning how to engage attention.
Yes.
Whether yours is teenagers that don't want to pay attention, probably don't really want to be there, or it's people that don't understand the law at all, or something that's really complex and it needs to be explained in a way that's understandable and it's persuasive.
Yes. And that's all like what we learnt in law, but also reps, like you said. It's not just speaking, it's capturing attention, it's holding attention, it's knowing how to scope and sequence your argument so people are following along and not tuning out. You know that moment when you're like, oh God, they're not in. You know how to re-engage. Yep. So same as you, it's been there for a long time. But then you have people that are like, but you're just naturally like this. You're just a really natural speaker. Breanna, you're just a confident blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I have been doing this my whole life. It's reps. And so my question to you is, what would you say to the person who's like, but you're just a natural, or I'm not like that? Were you a natural? Were you someone like as a kid where you're like, fuck yeah, bring me all the speaking?
Yes, but also no, if that makes sense. Like no one comes out of the womb say like with no language saying, give me a microphone. Right? Like it's learned. Yeah. And so yes, there was an age, like my old man was a politician. So I always grew up with, you know, spotlights and cameras and it was a very normal thing in my childhood to be in the newspaper or like on TV. So there was no kind of resistance around, I can't be in the spotlight. There was more of a gravitational pull towards it because he loves it so much. And it was normalised. It was normalised. Yeah. But then also because of the pathway that I went through with uni and stuff where I hated it and I became, inverted commas, not a natural, where like when I would literally speak and I would like, you could hear it fluttering in my voice and I would lose the capacity almost to think. Yeah. So it wasn't innately natural. Like everything we do for the most part is learned. Yeah. And so, and I'm sure people can even listen to this and be like, oh, it's easy for them to say because they're both charismatic. They're both of these things. But for both of us, unless it was a different for you, like it was learned. Oh,
100%. I would say the same. I would say that there is, like you said, both, yes and no. Like I think we've got an innate nature to some extent. And I always loved music. And I was singing. So I was on stage from a young age. I was doing dancing. I did enjoy those types of things, but also it was encouraged in my home. My parents were really proud and they were, you know, encouraging it. And so there was a lot of conditioning that happened that supported the reps that then made me more, you know, skilled, and that would lead people later to be like, well, but you were just always like that. Yeah. Which is why I say to clients, but you can learn the skill because we have been learning the skill for years. Yeah. And that's when clients might say, or aspiring coaches, anyone might say, but I'm naturally introverted. What do you say to that?
So am I. Yeah. So this is, and we were talking about this earlier, there is such a misunderstanding around introversion and extroversion. I would say, I mean, I don't really prescribe to either label, but if I had to, I'm an ambivert. I'm both. Yeah. Like introversion, extroversion is around how you replenish your energy. Yeah. Are you energized by being around other people, or are you energized by being alone? I am both. Like I'm going to walk out of here bouncing off the fucking walls with excitement because I love this stuff. Yeah. And then, but also then tonight I want my time to myself to recuperate and not talk to anyone. What people misunderstand, they think introversion is shyness and almost a meekness, but that is actually usually a lack of confidence. It's you can't walk into a room, you're not comfortable with people looking at you, you're constantly worrying about what you've said, what people are going to think of you, you probably walk away with social anxiety from situations. It's more of that than, oh, I'm just an introvert.
So true. And then how does that relate to charisma? What's your definition? We had such a good chat about this, which I just want to wrap up again. What is charisma then?
For me, charisma is... It's a few things. It's confidence. I don't know a single charismatic person that doesn't carry themselves with confidence. And don't get me wrong, that might not be in every area of their life, you know? So it might be they're very charismatic in a work setting, but maybe they're different at home. Doesn't mean that it's fake. It's just degrees of confidence and embodiment show up differently. So it's confidence, and it's also how you make people feel about themselves.
Yes.
But that's also a confidence thing.
Yeah.
Because especially for aspiring coaches, if you're shy, if you're self-doubting, if you don't really know if you can do this, if you're not backing yourself in your coaching abilities from an embodied perspective, not just the story you tell yourself over and over, I know I'm good, but you don't actually really feel good.
Yes.
When you show up to calls and you're a little bit timid and you stutter and you don't want to guarantee them a result because you're actually not really deep down sure you can follow through on a transformation, that energy is felt.
Yes.
Whereas when I show up to a call, because I know those things, I know I'm good at what I do. I have so many transformations that I've helped clients with. Like even the energy that you can hear me talking in this now, there's so much conviction.
Yeah.
So you can call it charisma, but it's actually not. It's confidence, and it's how I'm making you feel about yourself.
Yes. And you will make someone, because I feel your embodiment, which is what I'm hearing. When you're talking about charisma, and that definition was so perfect, what I hear is it's somebody who's embodied. They're speaking about their offers like, I know this shit works. And I said to this client, the question was, okay, so these coaches, these humans, these quote successful people that you look up to, what is it that you're saying is charismatic? What is it that they're displaying? And it was, well, they're just really confident. And so then the question becomes, well, where are you not confident in your offers? People often say to me, wow, you make me want to buy and I don't even need what you're selling, or I don't. And it's like, I am so confident and convicted and embodied in what I teach and what I say that I want to shout it from the rooftops. There is no lack of confidence there. And to me, charisma is that full alignment, and that's what embodiment is. What you think, what you say, and how you act is all in complete integrity. And somebody who is in complete integrity with their words, thoughts, and actions, they are fucking charismatic. You can't help but be like, what are you smoking? What is this stuff?
Yes.
And I want some.
Yes. I would say that like the additional thing that I would almost add with a charismatic person is there's a warmth. And that is usually, because that can be indescribable, or there's no word, but what warmth normally is an open heart and a kindness that they're operating from. And there's not a lack of judgment or projections onto a client.
Otherwise, it's just arrogance.
It is arrogance. So it's a real, like, I see you. You're making people feel seen. And you're also almost making people feel loved in your warmth. So it's not, you know, the person that's standing with their arms crossed being like, well, why don't you just sign up to another program? Clearly, you're not doing anything about it. You're not going to call that person charismatic.
No.
You might call them persuasive. They might have a lot of push energy. They might still have a successful business, but you're not necessarily going to call them charismatic.
No, because that person has broken rapport, which is not charismatic at all, which is so interesting. I'm really curious to know, and I don't know how you would answer this. This is just my own projection, and I'm very aware of this. Did you ever hold any shame around being that quote show pony that we said, like, you know, in the younger days you were the show pony? Did you ever have any stories or work that you needed to do? Because as a society, we definitely do. I've noticed there's a bit of the, you're the too much girl. Don't be too much. Dim yourself down. That tall poppy syndrome, that get back down off the pedestal, too much kind of shaming of the show pony. Did you have to go through any of that?
It's interesting, not, I would say, in an academic or career setting, because the same as what you said about your childhood it resonated so much about, it was almost conditional approval, because my old man was a politician. So it was like, it was constantly positive feedback loop. But I noticed it in romantic settings. Being like the loud, the too much, the intimidating. I had to do some work around that and what I was making it mean. And it actually wasn't that. It was like a lot of other shadows and like projections and stuff. I think it's very easy to just say, oh, I'm loud and I'm too much. And it's like, well, yeah, but maybe you're controlling and hypercritical and forceful. So I noticed that coming out maybe in more romantic settings, but not necessarily in career, because it was all high school because it was always approved in achievements.
Yeah.
But did you have to navigate shame around it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I remember being the show pony, and I really hated that label. And it was true to an extent. I loved singing. I was the soloist in choir. I was the kid that got excited about the oral presentations. And a few too many times I was hurt by that, because I'd hear, girls saying, you're a show pony. Or I remember once I was given the solo. I was given the solo in choir, and a few girls, choir was cool when I was at school. And it was like,
bring back cool choir.
Yeah, bring it back, because it was the best. I fucking loved choir. It was a highlight of school, and it was a very competitive thing to go for the solos. And I got them quite often, which led to a bit of stuff in the schoolyard because lots of girls wanted it. And it got to a point where I didn't want the solos anymore. I didn't want the lead. I didn't want to be the show pony. I just wanted friends. And so I started to really shame and not like that part of me. And that was really something I had to work through in building a coaching business, which, as you know, requires you to take up space again.
Oh, yeah.
It massively requires you to step back into your coaching energy. It massively requires you to step back into leader energy, teacher energy, and all those archetypes that require you to, show up charismatically online, sell something with complete conviction, be a convicted leader in whatever it is you preach and teach. And I had to work through a lot of shame to be able to do that. And now I'm like, yeah, call me a show pony, whatever. I love that part of me.
I think what I'm hearing as well from that is there's no way that you don't have a shadow side of this as well.
Yeah.
So, and it's really easy to pedestalize charisma or other things, because what I kind of realized in that is that even though it might not have been shame, for me became this intense pressure to achieve. I became known as the person. I always won school championships. I always won came second in my zone district. I always went on to area. And so even I remember even in year 6 as a little kid, all of the kids would be like, oh, Sarah's speaking now. Sarah's going to win. And the pressure that would create for me to have to perform, to be perfect, to be a high achiever, I have carried that. And as we know how developmental our childhood is, there's always going to be shadow sides of whatever you're perceiving as, inverted commas, the natural ability or the charisma or whatever it is that you're building. There's always going to be something that you have to clock and work with on it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And as you were talking, I was like, actually, I can see where mine was. And we've spoken about this because I had the reinforcement. You're such a good speaker. You're such a good communicator. And I had all this evidence to support that. I could then be very blind to myself, where I was actually speaking in a really vague way, where my messaging was actually not, I was showing up on camera and I wasn't actually utilizing those skills because I was becoming blind to myself, so I couldn't improve. So that's really interesting too. And being aware of these things, I think, helps business so much. So obviously you went from law to lots of things, and now you're a coach and you've done really well in your coaching business. How have all of these skills and reps, because I'm saying skills so that every listener knows it's a skill set that we've developed through reps in the gym, just time on the gym floor, metaphorically doing the speaking, doing it in front of lots of people, all of that. How did your background in speaking and all of that really help you in your coaching business?
In every single way, right? And a lot of people that want to start a coaching business are so afraid of, inverted commas, starting again. But there's always been skills. I never would have consciously at the time thought, my public speaking as a 10-year-old has built me a skill set to become a coach. Right? And equally, my skill set as a lawyer, one of the single most compliments that I always get is that I can explain very complex things in a very simple way. Most of my clients don't know that they're learning quantum physics, epigenetics, nervous system work, because I don't have the ego, I've done a lot of work on it, that I need people to be impressed by my knowledge. So I would say one of the ways that it's come through, and again in how I speak, is I articulate things in a very understandable and a very engaging way. Most of my clients have no idea how deep I'm actually taking them in some of the stuff that I'm doing, but also how I hold their attention. Because I'm not not focused on my shadows of them being impressed by my knowledge and giving them absolutely everything I've ever learned, like, you know, the entire spiel of like epigenetics and like all of the work that I'm like, no, I'm only going to take what's relevant. I'm going to explain it to you in a way that is relevant for you, that engages you, that you can learn, that you can immediately integrate into your own life. You don't necessarily need to know unless it's relevant, you know, because some of the work I do is spiritual. If I have a highly analytical client that's like so anti woo woo, then I will, because they need it. You need to almost to bypass that critical faculty system. Like in order for the rapport to be built, they need to know the science behind it, or they need to know what it is. Whereas for other clients, I won't. So I only ever actually bring it in when it's relevant for their transformation. But again, this is all reps that we'll learn over time. Like the speaking is in everything.
It is. And I don't think people straight off the bat would be like, gee, I didn't see how this actually came into that. Like, what I hear when you were speaking is, when you understand this, you have more intentional program design. And that's, you know, as people who are in the coaching space are usually trying to scale off their teacher archetype, not so much coach. And so you want to be able to learn when your students are losing attention, how to bring it back in, and to know, and this is ego work, when you're actually throwing things at them, which is just for you to look smart, that is actually overwhelming them and making them disengaged, as opposed to giving them exactly what they need for the transformation that you promised, and then maybe having a really intentional design or offer, what's it called? Client journey. Where they're following along with you because they're engaged and they're on track with what you're teaching. It's all speaking skills, rapport skills, charisma skills, and learning how to decode those micro gestures that your students are showing you that helps you to then teach better, coach better.
Yes. And one thing I've noticed you and I do really well is we use humor as a tool to engage our students, or even just to engage people online. So like, if I can clock, even when I'm teaching, that people's faces, the micro facial expressions, even if it's different to what they're typing in the Zoom box, pumped. I'm like, if I can tell a bunch of you are distracted, I will like somehow make a joke out of it. A lot of the time you start losing people's attention. And again, if anyone's like the teacher archetype, this is so potent for you to know, is when you're getting them to live integrate questions and people are completing it at different rates, you do start losing people that finish before others. And when their focus goes out, they all need to be brought back in, so attention is being held through the whole thing. So I have jokes in almost every one of my programs. I'm like, I can see the thinking faces. I can see the concentration faces. All right. And I'll be like, all right, give me some spirit fingers when you're finished. Like something that's like funny and also engaging them back into a present moment as a tool. And then everyone's back on board. Whereas a lot of people, they'll just wait and they'll be like, okay, and click the next slide. It's like, if your students are bored, you have lost them and they're not going to get the transformation. You might be an amazing teacher. If they're not engaged, they will not get the transformation that you're offering.
So true. Amen to that. That we need to just package up, end the conversation there, because it's
mic drop, we're done.
But actually that's it. And that it almost feels like, well, how does that relate to charisma? Because that's a teaching skill. No, it's not.
It's all the
if
same.
I saw someone like you teaching in that way, where it's like, okay, we're changing the energy. They've been a little bit bored. They've been in their analytical mind. Now we're bringing humor in. Now we're doing this. We're changing energy. We're bringing in all these different techniques in teaching and in speaking. The person who is receiving that would be like, God, she was charismatic. No. Well, yes and no. She is charismatic. She's a skilled speaker. She's a skilled teacher.
And also skilled in multiple modalities. So for example, like some of my teaching workshops, if there is a section where they need a lot of learning, the intentionality in building curriculum, I will clock. I'm like, right, okay, that's going to be a lot for them there. So there, I'm going to build in a state change. Right. Everyone get up. We're going to do we're going to shake. Or we're going to move. I put T Swift songs on. And we'll literally dance it out. And then like, I'll actually get people to move energy. Then I ground them back down, like intentionally upregulate them. Then ground them back down and then go back into whatever we need to learn. And then I always ask them how they're feeling. So I'm clocking them to observe how a state change has helped them in that moment. But again, it is intentional curriculum building and also using multiple modalities to continue to engage people's attention. I'm not just charismatic and a good teacher. I wasn't just born that way. This is all skills.
So true.
And you only learn by doing it.
Do you know what I'm laughing at as you're talking? I don't know if you
do
remember.
all of this unconsciously as
yeah,
well.
100%, like 100%. And that's years, again, of being a fucking teacher. Like, that was my profession. But what I was thinking was, do you remember in law school? Holy shit. The law lectures. I remember, what was it? It was the worst. Tort law, or what was it? It was one of the most... property law. I hated property law. And property law was 4-hour lectures by these old men who would speak at you monotone for 4 hours about the intricacies of property law. And I just think to myself...
equitable interests.
Like, no wonder I was like,
it's
this
so
ain't
funny
for
right
me.
now. Both of us have full body responses to this of like, ugh.
Gross.
Yeah.
So gross. But where I think is, can you imagine if universities and teachers, and this is why this is my fucking dream for the Mind School curriculum to be in every school and every university, teachers, tertiary education at the highest level, most of the professors are terrible communicators. I hate to say that, but it's true. I fell asleep in 80% of my classes. I left halfway through. I didn't go to most of them. Teaching is no different. I've got a teaching degree. Nowhere will we talk communication and rapport skills. Nowhere. So what happens with the teaching? It doesn't land.
Actually, it's funny you say that, because my property law teacher, he was one of the most sought out after. My university classes with him were like a Beyonce concert. Where
Really?
people, when it would go live to book in for the semester, you had to be refreshing and on it. And I drove an hour and a half each way. I went to a different campus to have him because he was so engaging. He was consistently voted the best law teacher every single year because he was so engaging. Because we had ours with 3 hours, but it was actually interesting.
Wow.
And I think it's just, you can be so good at your craft and so knowledgeable, but if you don't know how to engage and capture attention, your clients won't get the transformation that you want. And I think it's easy for you to then doubt your own abilities as a coach, but it might not actually be your abilities as a coach or even necessarily a teacher, but how you're engaging attention.
Yeah, that is so true. And I remember, as you were talking, I was thinking, I had one professor, same thing. He was so, and again, he was a professor of communications.
Yeah.
So this was
You'd hope he was embodied in that.
He was so embodied. I literally brought friends who were doing science degrees, and I was like, please come and listen. And they would come on a Monday night. I still remember it. This was actually in Vancouver. We would just sit there because we were on the edge of our seats, and I remember I booked a session with him to go speak to him, and I was like, what are you doing? What is this? I want to know everything. You're my idol. I love you. And he was like, well, I'm a professor of communication, so let's start there. But also storytelling. He was, every lecture was woven with stories. Every lecture had like a hero's journey almost inside of it. It was like he knew how to, like you said, change the energies and have you wondering, like, what was the answer to that solution? Like, is there a solution? He had us on the edge of our seats. And I'll never forget when I asked him that question, how are you the most engaging professor I've ever come across? And this was like in my second degree. I'm a serial learner. So like I've done a lot of courses with a lot of different teachers. This guy blew it out the park.
Amazing.
I was like, what is it that you're doing? And he said, storytelling. That was his answer. And I think that's an art that a lot of people have because we're doing this whole like 5 steps to hack the algorithm code, 10 steps to make 100K months, la, 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 la. And it's like, where's the story?
Yeah. And also, I think a lot of newbie coaches or even people that aren't embodied yet, even if they're like quite a little bit into it, there can almost be this need to show that you're embodied in the thing, so you don't story tell because you think that shows a lens of your imperfection.
Yeah. So true. Can you give an example?
So it would be, say you're a confidence coach, you can't ever show an example where you're not confident.
Yeah.
Unless it was so long ago.
Yes.
And you're kind of using it as like a dick swinging tool.
Yeah, so true.
But like, oh, look what I've overcome. But like if it was recent, you'd be like, oh no, I can't.
Yeah.
And so it's putting up a mask, which by the way will massively affect your confidence in a business because you're not actually embodied. You're just like putting up mask, like rather than like being an actual human, and you can use humor with it as well. You know, like you're a real human with real stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes what makes you the best teacher is to teach to things as live examples that are going on in your own life.
Yeah.
We are humans living a human experience.
Yeah.
We don't transcend a human experience, no matter how much work that you've got going on. The difference, and you and I have spoken about this before, the difference is your awareness is faster, you clock it faster, you have more tools to move through it quicker, and it generally doesn't dysregulate you or evoke it's not like a huge drama in your life, but it doesn't mean stuff doesn't happen. And so you can use those as teaching moments that your students will actually be able to relate to and understand, and because it's recent, the energy that you share it in is often more expansive and kind of alive. And it also makes your business easier because you're not trying to hide what's going on for you.
And it leads to, again, people will say you're charismatic, and it's like, no, you're sharing what's true. You're sharing from integrity. You're sharing from what is alive right now. And I always say to clients, if you feel like you have to put on a mask in your business, if you feel like you can't show parts of yourself, and look, there's nuance to this. Of course, your socials and your business.
Practice discernment.
Use
Be an
discernment.
intelligent human.
But also, if you are running from the places that you're not confident and trying to show up like I'm so confident in this, I'm so confident in this, the biggest hack that you can have to being charismatic, in integrity, feel more confident is to own the parts of yourself where you're like, guys, I'm actually feeling really, if you just said, I'm feeling really nervous right now, actually. I've said this to clients before. I am so nervous right now. This means so much to me that I am shaking. And I'm a really confident person. But sharing that, builds rapport because I'm being honest. That's what it is.
And how much easier it then becomes, which also it's also a tool in a way that's regulating your nervous system because you're not trying to shut down and push away the part that then becomes more active. You're actually in full acceptance. You're like, I see you. I'm accepting what's going on. And when I share that, I now no longer have to fight internally and somatically what's going on. And I'm actually just accepting it, sharing it, and it normally will actually down-regulate that too.
True. So true. I love this. So there's been some pretty wicked, I would say, tooting our horns here, but there's been some pretty sick tips here for people that are listening. But if you had any more to share, for anyone who's listening and they're like, shit, I want to improve this. I want to be an incredible communicator, speaker. I want the Riz as guys. So
I only just learnt what that was.
For anyone who's listening that don't have teenagers or children or haven't worked with kids, Riz is the street name, the current language, the lingo that's used for charisma. Man, she's got the Riz. He's got the Riz. So if you want more Riz, if you want more reps and you want to practice being a more charismatic speaker and engaging people, whether it's online or just in your life, what would you say are some hacks or tips or things that really help?
Number one thing, reps. I think it's easy to listen to some of that conversation, even some of the examples I was giving around spirit fingers and changing your state and being like, oh, I don't know any of this. And there can be then an internal push to go and learn more about those things so you can bring that in. No. You do. I learn all of that from doing. Yes, being trained in multiple modalities has helped me, of course, but you learn more by doing. And also not having a blame and shame around what works and what doesn't work. You just go, okay, almost observing from a neutral energy. Like I did this masterclass, people weren't as engaged as maybe they normally were. Cool, okay, what was going on? What energy did I show up in? Oh, I was actually super relaxed. I'd just been away for 4 days. Okay, cool, that makes sense. And also, that's perfectly okay. It was a masterclass I recently did on overwhelm. I'm like, so I probably shouldn't have come into in an upregulated state, right? Because that's excitement is also upregulation physiologically. I'm like, these people need a relaxation. But then also I've done other ones. I'm like, okay, everyone was like, blowing, tooting my horn left, right, and center. What did I do in that?
Was that?
Just all of it, neutral observation, but you only learn by doing it. Same with on social medias. Just get in front of your camera every single day. When I started, I had a face full of makeup, a filter, a face. Oh my God, a face. This is pre-coaching, by the way. I just want to caveat that. I was doing financial education. Face altering filters. Whatever made me comfortable to get up and show up and do the reps. And then over time, I'm like, now I will come on stories when I've just come out of the sauna with a hair mask. So I'm like half sweating, half wet, no makeup, half like in my bikini. And I'm like, whatever. But I did the reps to get there. You only learn by doing. So I would say that's the number one thing, learn by doing. Number two, I would say is if you're not yet confident, because that comes with reps, go where you're confident first. Go where you do feel embodied. So if you're new to say you're doing one-on-one coaching and you're new to that, and so you're a bit nervous because you're like, I don't have any proof yet to my brain that I actually am a good coach because I haven't coached anyone through a transformation yet. look to somewhere in your life where maybe you've helped a friend overcome an issue, or you do free coaching sessions. Do something that can get you in an embodiment of being able to speak to something in the energy of conviction. You know, like, I know that I can do this. And for some coaches, if you're really not sure, start with free sessions. I know a lot of people do. I personally didn't, but I also started out, I clocked so early in the beginning of one-on-one coaching where I felt really good, when it was where I was embodied. So I did like career change, career coaching, that type of stuff. And then I remember having one client who, she came to me for not feeling good enough, and I felt that massively at the time. I lost sleep before those sessions, and I can see it now. It's because I wasn't embodied in that thing yet. But again, just like that all comes with time. Like you can't look to people that have been in business or in coaching, or like you and I, we've been doing public speaking for decades, and compare yourself like, I want to be there now. You only get there by becoming that person.
And it's the reps. I fucking love that. I love that so much. I would agree. I'd say reps, and what you mentioned too is that reflective practice. And I think, again, even looking back at, again, reps, but years of teaching, when we did pracs, when we were learning to be a teacher, we always had to do what was called reflective practice. So after every lesson, it was like, what worked, what didn't, where did the students fall off? What does that mean about the way I'm teaching? How could I explain that better? How could I articulate that better? So I think reflective practice. But something that I said to this amazing client who asked this question this week was, these people that you're saying have the riz, they have the charisma, and they're so great at speaking and all of that. Choose those people that you are looking up to. That's incredible. But then get a bit more specific and curious, and actually look at that like a role model. What is it about them when they're talking that they do? How do they move their hands? What happens with their tonality? Do they change their tonality? Do they tell stories? Are they laughing a lot? What is it about those people? And start to role model. I really think that is how we learn. Like you said, we all learn through doing, but we're usually watching somebody else first, or being shown from somebody else who does it very embodied. So find the people that are great speakers, role model them and get curious about them, practice. And then the other thing that I would add is something that I want to piggyback. You said it's heart. Remember too that charisma is often about rapport building, and rapport building is about the other person. It's actually not about you. It's not about you. Speaking, you know, there's that quote, the most interesting person in the room is the most interested person in the room.
That gave me goosebumps.
They're interested in you. They're making you feel seen and heard. And you'll walk away going, that person was just great. I love that person. They made me feel seen and heard. That was a charismatic person. Also, the takeaway there is, remember that it's not about you. It's about your students. It's about your audience. It's about the message you're sharing. It's about how you're trying to make them feel. And if we can remove ourselves a bit from how we're being perceived and get rid of our own egos and our own things and make it about that person, that's how we build rapport. And that's naturally what makes you a more engaging speaker.
I so agree. And one thing on that, you and I both have much higher than the standard industry rate of clients re-signing and rejoining programs.
True.
And that, I believe, is not just because of all the teaching things that we've spoken about and intentional curriculum building and engaging. It is that, but it's also, we genuinely are interested and we genuinely care about our clients. Like, I know when I log in now to like a breathwork event or a masterclass, I'm like, hey Megan, how's your partner doing? Or hey Mary, like how was your move to Broome? Like, and I don't fall into a friend dynamic. Like, let's be clear, like you're still in a professional role, but you genuinely are interested in your clients. You're genuinely interested in that person. And the only other thing that I would add came through when you were talking about the reflective practice, and I'd forgotten that I used to do this. I watch back and listen back with a neutral energy. So even this podcast, because I'm going to start my own podcast soon, I've been desired. It's the only thing on my vision board from 3 years that I don't have yet. I even unintentionally had a cavoodle dog for a while that I was looking after that wasn't mine. But I will listen back to podcasts that I do with a neutral energy and be like, what did I do well? What could I improve differently? And honestly, a lot of the time, because we are always our own hardest analyzer. So even like with a neutral energy, we can still sometimes be critical. But from doing that over and over, a lot of the time when I listen back, I was like, fuck, you actually know what you're talking about, don't you, Sarah? You're fucking good. and you know, I've done it with public speaking, I've done it with horse riding, I've done it in the gym. I film and watch back for improvement.
Yeah.
It's constantly reflection and refinement. But again, and especially people that struggle with self-doubt and perfectionism, they will go into like, oh, I'm not good enough. They'll concentrate and fixate on what they did wrong, as opposed to trying to stay in an observer role of being, cool, I can clock that, we can shift that next time. Or also, fuck yeah, I can really feel into what I did do well.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. There is so many juicy nuggets in this. I'm impressed, guys. Let us know. We're going to wrap this up, and I reckon we're going to be back for another episode in a little while, because this has been so much fun. Guys, all of Sarah's information is in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you probably again in a few weeks, I reckon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to fish out by going toot toot.
If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to hit like and maybe consider subscribing. This really, really helps to grow this podcast, and it is a massive mission of mine to get you incredible guests and to increase and up level all the production so that I can help you to create your dream life, to get the most out of yourself, the most out of the people that you serve. And so please hit subscribe now, and I will see you back here in the next video.